All right, welcome back, everybody. Crushing Iron Podcast.
Today, beautiful day. Now that the crap weather has moved past, it's June 4th, the year 2025. Welcome aboard, everybody. You're listening to the Crushing Iron Podcast. This is episode 855.
Yeah, and you're right, man. I mean, that weather.
8 double nickel.
One time, every once in a while I just wake up, I look out, I'm like, wow, I'm just grateful, Just grateful for this weather, and I don't know. So I'm pretty chill with that. I'm pretty.
What is going on? Did you have like some herbal like sleepy time tea before we got rolling here? You're very zen today.
Yeah, I am.
You're just very grateful.
I was just thinking about it, man. I mean, it's like God. It's just there's so much going on. It's like we talk about. I don't want to get into this, but I really don't because but I think it's very interesting that sometimes I really don't go social media, and my time, I'm really getting proud of myself. It's really gotten less and less and less, but you can really go. I really think, man, and it's not necessarily people. I think it's certain people at certain levels, but there's algorithms and things of that nature. I just can't believe. I was writing the other day, and I was writing down how absolutely furious I was, but in deep down I was really super happy and content. But on the surface, it's almost like I'm fighting through this thing where I can't believe why do people make shit so hard? But because, you know what I mean? Because you can go on there and really start seeing things, and I think it's just like a constant, like it's like a fear machine almost, social media, or anxiety machine or something like that. And it's not really people. It's just that they get caught up and then they respond. But I don't think it's really driven by, like human beings that are normal, if that makes sense. But anyway, yeah. So, I mean, it's a sunny day. It's a beautiful weather,
Hey, I love it, man. Yeah, you did the usual power bar troll with you before we went live. You're like, let me take off the hoodie real quick.
Yeah.
Reminding me since I can't see and I hadn't checked the weather how absolutely gorgeous it is. I'm sure it actually wasn't bad here. I mean, we had like freaking Dorothy and everybody in between yesterday with some tornadoes here in peak Kansas weather. But this morning it was like a little bit breezy, but it was in like the high 50s. I mean, the humidity was like sky high post storm. But yeah, I mean, listen, I'll take it. But I agree with you. And we're talking a lot about emotions today and our mentality and how that affects our training. But I'm with you, dude. I try to tell us to Hayden all the time, like just, and when I'm telling him, I'm telling myself, and very similar to like, the conversations you and I have, like a lot of times we're speaking to the, you, the audience, but we're really just speaking to ourselves and having a conversation, between the two of us. And I try to just really get through to him, like, dude, like you really don't have any idea how good you got it. Like you just don't. And that's pretty much true for the majority of people, that are they're probably listening to this podcast. And like, yeah, life is tough, and yeah, we have obstacles, but I think a lot of times it's just everything's a choice. I mean, things are hard, things are difficult, and you can go through, read through Training Peaks comments, one person's rough day is another person's, like feels like a vacation. I was joking with an athlete who was heading out to do rim to rim. And I said, I think you're one of the few people I know that's going to head out to rim for like a leisurely, relaxing vacation. Because like he's like, the last 2 weeks I've had more billable hours and I've had my entire career and all this. I was like, dude, like, you're getting away from life, and the stress is going to lower, and you're going to have a great time and come back refreshed, which is crazy to think about, right? Because that's like an endurance feat people can't wrap their mind around. But it's all in the head, and it's all like how we think and our perception, right? A lot of people say, what happens to you, you have a choice of whether to make it, something horrific, something terrible, whether it's a lesson or whether you think it's a blessing, however you want to frame it. It really does depend on like, our view. And I think we talked one of the very first podcasts we did. There was a book I read called The 5 Agreements, and when I was in treatment, and one of the things talked about, everyone has their own version of their own reality. So like when someone reacts a certain way, it's not how you delivered it a lot of times, although it could be, it's how their day is going. You could tell one person one thing on a day where they're having the best day ever, and they'll just kind of like take it, roll off their back, and take it as a compliment. You might say the same thing the next day, and they've had a horrific day, and they're going to take it a totally different way. And so anyway, the point, being as kind of that we get into our topic for today. And I think it's a very important, because I think honestly, like as athletes and honestly as humans, controlling our emotions and our mentality and how those kind of wrap up with training is actually a much harder part than the training itself, because training can be very largely black and white, right? Did you go out and ride today? Yes, check, done. Did I not ride today? X, done. I didn't do it. Did I do the intent of the workout? It's very, very black and white, which is great, right? Some of it's obviously left up for interpretation, but a lot of times, like, that black and white can be skewed heavily by our emotions, right? That are impacted by, your relationships, your kids, your work, life stress, being on social media, right? Perusing through the old, 70.3 Facebook race page, like all it's really insane, like how impactful stuff can be in our day. And obviously, like, there are certain days where you're a lot more sensitive to something that you might read, see, or hear. Right. Again, going back to the person having a good day. Like, let's say you go out and you crushed your training session. You might peruse through social media or Strava, or take a look back through the archives and Training Peaks, and you might receive things very, very differently. Right. You're going to be a lot more resistant to any kind of like negativity creeping in. Right. When your ego is high. But with the fragile ego, which, is one of my favorite books from Ryan Holiday, Ego is the Enemy. We all have an ego. The more fragile our ego is, the more likely we are to respond negatively or to respond hurt, right? Versus like you go out and you have like a really shitty workout, or you had to miss your workout, and then you pop in like, hey, let me get on the old Eagle Man race page here on Facebook. And then you look at all these people pretty much that are just like probably talking about how great their training is. Yeah, I did like a 5-hour ride with like a 20-mile, run off it. It felt good. It's just a zone 2 recovery day. And you're questioning all your things in life. And you're like, I don't think I'm ready.
Yeah.
It's all in your head. So anyway, we were talking about this because before we went live, I had a swim lesson. The girl on Sunday, incredible athlete, just a natural. I tell our parents all the time, like, hey, if she ever wants to quit volleyball, she could knock it out of the park with swimming. But she's swimming summer league. Anyway, we were practicing her dives, and she goes in, and she's 13 years old, 13-year-old girl, which, they can have, swinging pendulum of emotions sometimes. And she dove off. Perfect dive. I got no complaints. And she pops up, her goggles came loose, which is obviously frustrating. So I could tell it kind of irritated a little bit. And then she walked back. I was like, all right, let's just do the same thing. Maybe tuck your chin a little bit more, and maybe hide our face, get your head down. Sometimes that's the reason our goggles fall off. So anyway, she goes out, she does that again, and again, perfect dive. Execution perfect, but lost her goggles. Gets back on deck in tears. Total breakdown. And I was like, what is going on here? What I don't understand. Like, is something wrong? Did you hurt yourself? No, and she's like, I don't know why I forgot how to dive. It's so frustrating. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, why don't you let me decide what is a good dive or not? Like, I'm the one that watched it. You're the one that experienced it. And the only thing negative you experienced was your goggle coming off. I was like, it might just be your goggle problem. So, and lo and behold, it was. She her straps in the wrong place, fix her straps, walk back in, dive, perfect. And she was happy. But her perception of like failure coming from the goggles coming off, leaking. She's like, oh, I want to go to a race, which is tonight. Goggles are going to come off. It's going to ruin the dive. The dive was perfect. It was just this accessory, right? Her goggle strap that wasn't in the right place, that radiated through her emotions, telling her, probably because, more likely, I could kind of tell by her face, when she came in, she was probably a little bit on the, sensitive side. And I just said, I said, listen, I said, you gotta, and I had a lot of F-bomb slip, which was before noon on a Sunday, which I try not to do. And I said, you just gotta fucking relax. I said, like, you're doing fantastic. And you got to lower the expectations and lower the pressure. Like, this is for fun. Like, we want to be good at this, but not at the sake of making it excruciatingly uncomfortable and like having our expectations so high. But again, like, that small detail is all she thought about. And you see it all the time in training, right? And a similar conversation with an athlete getting ready for a race this weekend. Everything's looking good, everything's looking fine, but it was like, oh, but my HRV is down. And I'm like, well, but yeah, but you feel fine, you feel great. Like maybe just put it in the drawer for the week and just like rock and roll. Like it's interesting, right? And there's a lot of, I think positives to using things like, resting heart rate and HRV, but I think a lot of people attach themselves way too much. Like they can wake up and feel great, but if their HRV tells them that it's like maybe a little bit lower, resting heart rate's higher, they're like, oh, maybe I should just call it a day. Like, but you ultimately, and a lot of times to me, it goes through like, I think it's very similar to a scenario like you really don't want to swim and you head to the pool and you walk on the pool deck and the whole pool's full. And you're like, see, just not on the cards today. Wasn't meant to be. And you go hit the hot tub and you leave, right? Because you're looking for any reason, any excuse for it not to go well and to not do it, right? Same goes for being ready for a race and race week. All these, again, and you and I see this a ton as coaches, right? The closer you get to the race, like the higher the emotions are. Everything is teetering on. I'm gonna kill it, and I think I need to quit. Like there really is an in between, right? It's a lot like, I'm sure like when people have to get married, they're like, can we just get it over with? Like let's just get this done. Like emotions are high, the day is getting closer, and so yeah, I mean, I just think it's a great reminder for us all. Like as important as training and metrics and numbers are, like your attitude. I'm gonna shut up. I'm waiting for you to raise your hand. But I had another athlete
Keep
last
forgetting.
week that was can be, not all the time, can be very negative about swimming. And I said, I just said, hey, listen, man. I said, he said, I read this workout. And it seemed daunting, and like you're trying to give me too much on purpose. And I said, listen, I said, if we go back over the last 18 months, we probably can't find a single bike or run workout that you went into with the negative headspace. But we can find plenty of swim ones. And I do think that carries into your ability or inability to hit the session. So instead of looking at the session as a total, right? Can I do this or can I not do this, and psyching yourself out, just go to the pool, start the workout, get as much as you can get done, and see where you end up. And so there's so much of what we do, both in training and out of training, is all about, like I really do. It's all about our mental approach, and then how are we measuring success? What are we letting interfere with our definition of success? So anyway, I think it's a good topic and a good reminder for us all how impactful, that our mentality and our emotions are, and how we get them wrapped up in training.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've spent a lot of time with this because, I do, like you said, I do try to calm things down a lot. I mean, but the reason is, and I think a lot of times, people that get very good at something have really struggled with it, and they've found ways, right? So I know that there's a lot of athletes that we work with that get very emotional and what have you, but I think that's part of your responsibility to work on it, and that's sort of how I do. Because when I started the sport, races would just drive me bonkers, and I was like swim anxious and all these kind of things, but I figured out ways to get through it. And I think that's, as an athlete, that's part of why you're doing this, because we all have those runs where we go out for 45 minutes and my God, that felt easy. But then, 3 days later, you got an hour and a half or hour and 45, and then it's just about, drains your soul. And then it's like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready. It's hard, everything we do is hard. It's not easy. Sometimes I'll see comments that, on bike workouts that are, pretty intense, and that ripped my soul. I don't know if I got, like, no. You're just working to get better, and at some point along the way, I think I sort of, kind of juxtaposed the term and concept of race with adventure. And then it became, I mean, you mentioned rim to rim, and it's like, nobody's out there with a stopwatch on people out there. I mean, of course, people time it and all that other stuff, but I just think of it as something like, all right, this is, a series of things I need to get through today and figure out how to be my best in each one. But if you're starting to think, on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday before you race about how intense it's going to be and how you're, you kind of imagine how you're going to feel when you're pushing it hard. And then it's like that particular thought process in some ways takes energy away from you. And I think it gives doubt because, you know, it's sort of like that worrying about something for 3 months that never even happened. You know, it's sort of just like hanging out there, and you're worried about it and you're worried about it. And then you go out and you do it and it's like, oh, wait, that was kind of cool or whatever. So it's like wasted, you know, they talk about how much energy, you know, thought takes, and using your brain all day takes, you know, I don't know what the number is, but it's like 20% of your energy during the day is based, or more maybe, based on just your thoughts. So to me, it's more about reframing and kind of looking at stuff like that. And you know, if you've had, if you put your head down for a couple months, or, I mean, shoot, I've had really good races where I've kind of fallen apart towards the end, but I've had a good middle block. And then I've had good races where I haven't trained that great going up to it, but I've had about a month and a half of solid work going in. I think that, you know, if you can get there, and this is what I try to tell people, is like, what do you mean? I'm looking back and you've done a lot of work. You're definitely ready for this. And, you know, and anything can happen on race day. And a lot of times that is kind of dictated by how you're going into it and your attitude and things of that nature. And when I say attitude, I mean calm and, you know, with pacing in mind and not trying to finish the entire race in the swim, you know, because that's a mentality that I had to get over. It's sort of like the cannon goes off and that's like, you just want to race, you know, but it's like such a long day that the huge part of racing is just letting it come to you. And I think when you shift your mindset like that and you kind of let it go, you know, because I talk about like how you can see people kind of hammer past you on the bike, and then, you know, you just kind of keep your own demeanor and keep your own pace and effort. And then, you know, 5 miles later, you kind of see him again, you know, or you're not that far behind him at the end, you know, because in cycling, you know, it takes quite a bit, you know, to really drop some. I mean, you can drop them, but, you know, you talk about substantial amounts of time, it's not that easy, you know. Like if you cook by me, you know, with 10 miles left and I kind of sort of just stayed with it a little bit, you might beat me by 5 minutes or, you know, whatever. So I think that truly is that tortoise hare thing. It's just like stay with it, don't overdo it, because I think the minute you, a lot of us, especially if we're not used to going to the well a lot, it can seem daunting. And I think that's how we sort of frame races sometimes, is like, oh man, this is just going to be one big pile of hell. And I've never put them together before this in training, but, and then you get into the taper pains and phantom pains, and you start thinking about all this shit. And it's like, you wake up 3 days before a race and you can barely walk because you're just tired and everything. But you got to realize that how many times people have started workouts in general feeling like shit, and then 30 minutes later they feel like they're Superman or whatever. I think that's what's going on. And, you know, the more fitness we build and the more strength we build, sometimes it does take a little bit longer to get loose and whatever. And then it's almost like I'll say stuff like that to myself as, man, I feel like I am just totally cooked right now 2 days before the race. And then, and then you think in yourself, that's a good thing. How do you frame it? Because you lose track of what that really is sometimes. And it's just basically your body is exhausted because it's pulling everything back together, and hopefully in the timing of everything is perfect.
You know, like it's you bring up such a good point there, right? It's like you have someone that, you know, you go into your race week and you're, you know, you're, like you said, and you're more sore than you think you should be. And you can either think, you know, one of two things, right? It's all about how you frame it. And obviously, you know, for a lot of people, it's like how you wake up in the morning. I'm in a good mood or a bad mood. And like, that's pretty much going to decide probably how you're going to respond to that. You wake up, you know, it's a Thursday, your race is on Saturday or Sunday, and you wake up and your legs are a little stiff. You know, there's one of two things. This taper isn't working. You know, I don't feel good. Like, this race is going to suck. And for the rest of the day, you're more than likely going to look for other reasons to affirm your original suspicion.
You're going to be the guy in the elevator.
Exactly.
Everything was going great till the day.
Exactly. And so, I think, again, or you could be the person where you're like, you know what? I went in and, I woke up and my legs are a little bit sore. I got a couple more days. It'll be fine. It's always better to have a little bit of tension versus no tension. Or, another way to frame it is like, well, you know what? I don't feel fresh, but there's been a lot of times where I've headed out for workouts and I haven't felt fresh and still freaking crushed it. Right. And there's a lot of days where I went out and I went and didn't expect at all to crush a workout. And I did. And there were also plenty of days where I thought I had the worst workout, or excuse me, I thought I had the best workout ever. And I ended up having one of the worst workouts ever. So, and then give you confidence, like, God, you just don't know how the day is going to go. Or you could just do something simply like, hey, just one more thing to fight through. One more thing to get through. But again, it's all about how you frame this. This is for, again, not just for races, but for sessions, right? It's like, how am I feeling, and then is that feeling, is it real? Is it real or perceived? Is it true? Just like, if you're having because a lot of times, it does with, with all humans, right? We let things bubble up and boil over. We might have a long wick or a short wick, but usually, whatever we end up blowing up on or getting super emotional about isn't the actual issue. It's something that's been like, low lying and kind of like slowly bubbling and residual that kind of slowly bubbles its way up. And then finally you just explode on someone, or you burst into tears, or it's the worst workout ever, I'm ready to quit, or this training sucks, or you're terrible. And I'm like, this isn't even like, what are we talking about here? And usually it's something totally unrelated that you just have like submerged, or you don't want to talk about, or you suppressed. And it's very, oftentimes not at all related to what actually just happened, right? It's like you ever see people like, go off, okay, sorry, I was a little bit hangry. So you're totally hungry, but you snap at somebody for no reason. So you being hungry and not eating, when you should have, made you just totally like rip into someone for no reason. Like that's very similar to like what happens in training. Again, if you're run down and you're tired, you're not going to go in with a positive attitude. You're probably going to go out with a little bit less, right? You're going with less sleep and less fuel, and you're overly tired because you haven't recovered enough. Then guess what? Like you're probably not going to be as resilient as you could be with this high motivation if you were well rested and ready to pop. I mean, it's common sense, but like we forget about this stuff all the time, and we make these swinging emotions on the pendulum like on a dime. I mean, you're the same way. Like, every coach has athletes that basically change their entire, race year after one 30-minute run. And then the next day it completely changes again. I'm like, what? It's also good to just not make decisions. Just like keep moving in a direction. You're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days. Like I think this is part of life, right? You can't do it. You show up. I'm not going to go to work today because I don't feel good. You just show up to work and get the job done. And again, like I think we have to do a better job of separating what's reality and what's not, and stop being a prisoner of the moment of certain sessions.
Yeah.
Guess what? If you're really consistent, you're going to have a bad session a week, a great session a week, and the rest are going to be mediocre. I mean, if you're not having like somewhat, not awesome sessions, you're probably not being consistent enough. If every session is great, you're probably not working hard in some of the sessions you should work hard on. And vice versa. So again, there's so much we get so wrapped up and we've talked about it on, a number of podcasts, how important where you are mentally is on how you're going to execute on race day. Give me the person who's overly fresh in a great headspace over the person who's perfectly trained, but not motivated and second guessing themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And I think it's just hard to remember as an athlete. That's why I say I've had to work at that kind of stuff a long, long time too, because it's easy to get caught up in the moment. And I've developed sort of that phrase, don't think about it. And, I think you've referred it, it's almost like fake it till you make it kind of thing. But, people, I know that, maybe, the race weather's going to suck or whatever, but I'm trying not to think about it and not letting that affect me. And then people come up and go, hey man, this weather's really going to suck. I'm like, shut up, man. I don't want to think about that right now because I'm working on other stuff. And in the email to, I think, my athletes this week, maybe even I'm always kind of thinking about training from the mental game side, and little things like, how, well, of course, but everybody knows how after you sit down for a while at a desk or a chair, and I don't care if you did work out or didn't work out, every time you get up or sitting in a car for a long time, you're just like, oh my goodness, you feel like your whole body's falling apart. And one of the things I've been, trying to do with stuff like that is every time I get up from the chair, I'll be like, whoa. And then I'll acknowledge it, but then I'll just let it go because I know it's not real. You know what I mean? That's the thing, is what is real too, because we have these quick thoughts that sort of take over our mind, and I think I'm referencing a lot of times race week, because that, you got that little extra time and you have the chance to doubt stuff like that. But, it's sort of like you said, getting up in the morning, getting out of bed, usually, my first half a dozen, 5-10 minutes are a little bit creaky sometimes. And I don't like associate myself with that being the reality of my life. I know that it's going to go away. And it's sort of about how do you get through it? How do you keep, because movement is the medicine, but, it's sort of like we give too much power to stuff like that, because you can be sitting around during half the day and be like, I feel pretty good now, but man, when I woke up, I don't know if I'm ready or whatever. It's just kind of this thing that I think we should work on letting go of, because, you go into every training session, I feel different going into it. So it's almost like a puzzle every time. And how am I going to make this feel good? Or how am I going to figure out how to get through this? Or, man, I'm not running at the pace I did, Yesterday, I actually took a little nap, and I woke up and it was absolutely pouring outside. And my first thought was like, I got to go run. I just put on, and it was kind of cold. I put on my run stuff and I walked out in my t-shirt, and I'm like, it's like 50 degrees and pouring. And so I threw on a zip up and I actually started running. And I was like, for no reason, I wasn't even supposed to run, but I thought I was going to do something. It was too windy to go out on the lake or anything, so I just ran, and I found myself going, this pace isn't really, I'm like, no. This is an adventure, man. This is just something to kind of figure out, if it starts pouring in a race and it gets cold, maybe I'll be a little better prepared for that or whatever. Or just figure out a way to kind of tweak my brain and get through it. And I'm just going to go for a run for 2 miles. And then I got to the 1 mile question, do I turn or do I go around? And I ended up going for 3 or something like that. But the point is like I wasn't like super proud of the run or anything like that speed wise, but it was just something to do. And it was like a mental exercise for me. And I think we have a lot of opportunities. And I just think that's the whole point sometimes. It's like, everything isn't just going to go smooth. How many races, I'm sure we've had athletes that have just like, that race just clicked, but that's so rare. Most of the time we have to figure out ways to get something done when it's not going our way. And to me, that's the whole part of training.
It's all about the decision you make in the moment. And honestly, sometimes it's all about the decision you don't make in the moment, right? The decision to make it a positive decision. Oh, it's raining, or I can't do it. Or again, there's like, we all have like 2 different kinds of athletes. 1, it's raining. Oh, the sky is falling. Or 2, I just had the best run in the rain. Right? It's like there's really no in between. Or I'll do it later, or I'll push it, which is fine. But it's like you look for those opportunities. It's kind of like going back to that quote I had the other week. It was like, that guy said, no one has to change for me to win. But we are so oftentimes so easily deterred and moved off of our goal based on how sensitive or tired or weak or hungry or dejected or just negative that we are. And some days it might take, the slightest, 1 mile an hour breeze to knock you off your game. Some other days when you're super strong and you're feeling awesome, there's nothing that can blow you off your game. It's all about probably how you woke up, how you prepared, and we have this conversation a ton with people. Like, like, I'm really struggling with motivation. I just don't know what's wrong with me. And I'm like, dude, like look at your life. You're like barely functioning at the moment because you have so many things going on. You can't be, and so, again, I think we oftentimes just have so many like unrealistic expectations about it all that we just set ourselves up for failure over and over and over again. We expect amazing things from ourselves all the time for, I'm not really sure why. I mean, we don't expect that of anyone else. And if you do, it's unfair. But for us, we expect it as perfection all the time. And that's just not the reality of the situation. Like you got to figure something out to where it's a lot more positive, and that's just not the case. You have to take each day and stop having super high expectations, right? And expecting things of yourself you wouldn't expect of anyone else to be able to do. And if someone else told you and removed your name and said something else, you would say, that sounds really unreasonable and unfair. I had a mom text me last night I coach her daughter with swimming, and she said, hey, do you know this coach at this team? And I said, never seen before in my life. And she said, good. Well, we came to practice tonight, and this is the coach for 6 p.m. on Tuesdays, and all she's done is yell at the kids the whole time about how not good they are. We will not be coming back to this practice. Mm. And that might seem like crazy coaching, which it is, and terrible. But the other time, like, we do that too. We are our own coach sometimes too. Like you're the one in your head when you're out running and riding and swimming. Even if you have a coach, even if you're working off a plan, you still are on the coaching staff of yourself. You're more than likely a much heavier part of the psychology staff of your part. I mean, that's part of it. But many of you probably also are just so negative about all the training that you do and all the lack of outcomes, instead of taking it, with a grain of salt, or just taking it and moving on. Or finding it. You don't have to find the positive in everything. I think that's, also kind of slightly annoying, because sometimes there is a negative, and that's okay. But it's about not making rash judgments, right, on things, but also keeping things a little bit low. Hey, I'm heading out today. It might go great. It might not. Decent example might be, I got up this morning. I went for a run. I had some intervals. I did my warm up. I ran over to a track, and I was supposed to do like 4 intervals. Well, midway through the second one, I was like, there ain't no way I'm doing 4, because I'm not sure I can handle 4 today. But I was like, I'm going to get done my third. So I did my third. And I got done my third, and I was like, you know what? I'll start my cool down on the way home, and then see what happens. And I left out, and I was cool, and I was like, you know what? I think I got one more in me. And so I just ripped off that interval again on the way home. And I did it because I felt good, but I didn't make the decision in real time after my third interval. This is just done. Definitely, I can't do it. I guess I better just stop. It was, let me just see what happens. Like, at least it's like I think we should always, for the most part, not always, but often, we should leave the door open, right? Or leave it a little bit cracked. Not totally shut the door on a success or a failure. Leave the door open. Leave it cracked. You never know what else is going to walk in. Don't write off the day with that first spilled cup of coffee at 6 a.m. in the morning. There goes the day. Ugh. Smoothie cap busts off, and you got spinach green smoothie everywhere in the kitchen. You're like, God, we're just going to ruin the rest of my day. Could be the best day of your life. You never know. Mm-hmm. Same thing with the workout. Don't let the warm up. You say it all the time. Don't let the warm up fool you. Takes a little bit. Don't let the first rep even fool you. A lot of times, almost all times, people's last rep is better than the first, but we get so caught up in that first one that it really impacts the rest of our workout, or your ability or inability to continue to put the effort you need to have into the rest of the time.
Yeah, man. I don't know. I've got this thing where, if you've done it, like if you're in training, let's say you're 2 weeks out or a month out from your race, and you have a really great ride and it feels good, it's clicking, it seems like you're maximizing energy, you're not overdoing it, whatever the case may be, then I think, I just always try to screenshot that in my brain. It's like, oh, I can do it. I know I can do it. And it doesn't always click, but it's in there. It's like, I don't it's like when we went to the trace recently, and we just went down up and down that hill all day for like hour and a half or whatever it was. And I thought to myself, well, this hill is, reminiscent of one of the big hills in Wisconsin. We just did it like 10 times that day. And I thought to myself, I didn't have power going or anything like that. I was just doing it. I was actually going to text you and say, hey, what kind of power were you throwing up that hill or whatever? But I didn't. I just realized myself, I was like, okay, that's a pretty good stepping stone. It's like, all right, I feel like that's a good indicator that I can do things, do something right now that, I might be able to do a lot better later. I'm 3, 4, or 5 months out from a potential race or whatever. And it's just a good sign. I don't like to get caught. I don't think we should get too caught up in metrics all the time. I'm like, you talk about me as sort of being in the ballpark guy. And that's kind of how I think of metrics. Every once in a while I'll get on there and I'll look at pace and heart rate and speed and all that sort of stuff. But I'm more generally feeling like, how does this feel in the big scope of the training plan, whatever. How does this set in and pay off later? As you know, I'm a Badgers fan, and we've got Luke Fickell, who's now the coach. And I remember last spring, I was like, all right, he had a bad year his first year. And then this time, we got all these new recruits and everything. And I listened to the strength and conditioning guy in preseason, like fall practice or whatever. And he was listing off all these guys on the team. It was like the Badgers are never really a fast team or whatever. But now we've got, he just listing like 10 guys who are running 20 plus miles an hour in practice. Like these guys are speed, we got their bodies reframing, they're reconditioning their bodies, and their shape is different. And then now we got 10 guys that are going over 20 miles an hour. And everybody's like, whoa, man, we're going to kick it. And the worst season ever that I can remember. And halfway through the year, like one of the radio hosts or whatever is like, hey, does anybody got any questions we can ask these guys? I was like, yeah, ask that strength guy if those guys are still running 20 miles an hour in practice or whatever. It's like, because they can't win. They can't play, you know what I mean? They can't deliver on the field. And it's like, we can get caught up in metrics and think, man, I am fast or whatever. But do you have the tenacity, or do you have the ability to pace, or do you have the ability to get through tough conditions, or figure it out if your stomach's a little off or whatever? Those are the things that show up on race day, that show up on game day. And I think we always have to be working at that. A lot of times I'll say, man, somebody will say, man, my stomach is all jacked up today. And, it's 2 weeks, 3 months out from the race. I'm like, good, figure it out. Don't let it happen again. And it's easy to forget that. I've done it. I had a bad stomach last year for the first time. And, but I've been working on those types of things. Like, why does that happen? And for me, it's just going into my own sort of laboratory and figuring out, because you can read about, somebody else's journey. I always just take that stuff with a grain of salt. It's like, all right, that's an idea that somebody has for me. Now, how can I make it my own? It's sort of with my athletes. Like, I'm always trying to tell them, it's like, like you said, with that extra, I'm going to do one more. That's the option I want people to have, sort of certain days. That should be the option. It's certain days it's like, I can't do one more. And then it's like, maybe you can. Try and figure it out. And that little process right there is a huge thing of, with performance, is just kind of figuring that out in your brain and being able to flip that switch when you need to. Some days you might want to do 10 more and feel great about it. But one day it's just like, one more. How can I pull that out? And to me, that's training, It's not just, all going to lay out perfect. Every race, even, people who have great races have to fight through different situations. It may look good on paper, when you just see the time or whatever, but that doesn't mean it went easy.
Yeah. I mean, that's like, and that's just so similar to what we see in life, right? Some people just find a way to get it done. And I do think, like, just going back to like social media, it's like, a lot of times we see people that are in better shape and doing all these things. You're like, they must be nice to have all that extra time. And the truth of the matter is guess what? They probably don't. They just choose to do what they want to do with training more than you want to do, more than you don't. Right? Yes, there's some people have less time than others, sure, 100%. But I'm pretty sure every person on this planet, if they needed to audit their time on a 2-week span, would probably find 5 to 6 hours easily of time completely fucking wasted.
Yeah.
Right? Staying up too late, watching something on, TV, not going to bed early, scrolling through social media, not being disciplined, taking too long to do this, piddling around, for sure. So let's say you waste 6 hours, 3 extra hours a week you could add on to your training. That can make you better. 12 hours a month, right? That's a 144 a year. That's it. That's so much time. I mean, it's so much time, but again, I think, again, that's just part of our attitude on how we think everyone else has it easy, and they just don't. Like, we all have things that are hard, and even if they do, guess what? Find not pleasure in the pain, but find positives in the hardships. You know what I mean? Like, this can make me stronger. I'm getting this done. Yeah, I gotta cut the warm up short and the cool down short, but I got the meat of it in the day, and that's okay. Just again, like, as you go into these races and you go into these, final training blocks, you're getting ready to, enter just the first part of your training block. Go into it with with the open mindset, and just remember, like, don't let the pendulum swing so much. Just don't let it kind of hang in the middle. Don't feel overly great one day and overly worse. Like, just hang out in the middle. This shouldn't be so polarizing with our emotions and our level of confidence or our self-criticism. A lot of times it's almost better to be emotionless with it, right? It's supposed to recharge you, right? Make you a better spouse, make you a better parent, make you a better worker, make you a better friend. Like, that's what it should be doing. But if we go into them and we're looking for things, in that ways, because that's the beauty of, like, surprising ourselves. Like, I just didn't really know how it's going to go. I love that mentality, because you didn't, I had a guy do at some bike testing on Tuesday. Yeah, I'm pretty unhappy with this bike result. I was really hoping it'd be this. Like, well, that's irrelevant. Well, your hope is irrelevant. Like, I wish I was a billionaire, but I'm not. Right? It's like, so I don't wake up today, like, just, resenting the world because I'm not, because there's a lot of problems coming being a billionaire too. I'm sure.
Say,
Like,
do you really wish you were a billionaire? That'd be interesting.
No, I really don't. I didn't have no idea. I wouldn't retire, that's for sure. So I don't even know what I would do. But it's just like, we want so many things, and sometimes we don't even know why we want it. Right? We just make it up. We're like, I think this is what sounds good. It's the trike-out thing, right? I think this is what I want. And you're like, why do we like we all, everyone does it. Right? I do it. Everyone does. We all go down that rabbit hole, And so I think it's something that we all have to, be smart about and calculate, and just, do a self audit, not on your time, right? But on your where you are mentally and emotionally with your training, right? Are you being too polarizing on one end or the other? And I think that the more steady you can stay, the better you set yourself up for success. Because the steadier you are, I think it's to me, it's kind of like it's being firmly planted in, where you are on 2 feet. You've always said, be where you are. Not where you want to be, not where you were before, not where you thought you'd be. Just be where you are. Because that is like a way to surprise yourself, because you're going to surprise yourself in a positive way, or things can happen negatively and you're like, you know what, that's okay. Because again, you didn't swing the pendulum all the way to I'm going to nail this workout, and then you don't have a good one. So the distance between the great and all the way over to the I didn't do so well is huge. And that's basically the equivalent of your emotional swing, right? A drastic emotional swing versus, I didn't really know how the day go. It didn't go that great, but you know what? There's always tomorrow. Like, nothing. No, like, nothing happened negatively. It just happened. And you move on, and you're like, you know what? Guess what's I wonder what surprise I'll have tomorrow. Like, could be a great one, could be a not great one, could be a mediocre one, but I guess let's find out when I do it. And that's that. Again, I know it doesn't sound sexy, but I'm telling you, it sets yourself up for a lot more success and a lot more of an enjoyable time than trying to measure things before you even go out the door.
Yeah, I think that is. I mean, we kind of talked about it before the cast, but it's sort of like, what do you want out of this? Because, a lot of times it is that, I don't know, that sort of fictitious time or thing that we're hoping for in a race. And then that becomes the driver. And then, I'll see, yeah, I know, coach, I should probably work on my mobility more. I should work on my stretching or like recovery, whatever. But they don't do it, and then so what I've been working on is sort of triggers, right? That, if I think I want to just sit down and watch TV or whatever, that's an immediate trigger for me to go into like, some simple, not stressful, but, like stretch poses or something, and just do that for a while, rather than have to have it always on the calendar or whatever. But, and, that's another thing. Yeah. It's like, I have a couple podcasts that I listen to, and I know a lot of people probably use this one maybe on their trainer when they're running or whatever. And that's it. I'm not against that. I think there's always good stuff that, out there. And that's just kind of what I've been thinking about it in terms of more as like, a lot of people will send podcasts or documentary links and stuff like that. And it has to be the right situation, because a lot of times I used to do this a lot where I'd go down and just listen to shit all the time. Just listen. But now I'm trying to trigger it in to be, if I decide to do that, maybe it was like yesterday, I would just go for a little run. If you want to, because my goal is to sort of be more durable, always be more durable, as I get older. And sometimes that can be, well, I don't really have anything to do right now. Well, maybe that's just a 20-minute run. You can add a little volume without hurting yourself, or get on the bike for 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Those are the little things that I think create better habits for your real outcome that you really want, because when you come down to the race day, I just think we put that too high on the pedestal. I think the race should almost take care of itself. And I think it's our responsibility to, along the way, do little things that are going to make that day better, rather than always expecting, just thinking that a carrot's going to lead your goal. It should be more about the process. And then it's like we talk about studying for a final, yeah, you can cram overnight and drink coffee and then hope it goes well. That might work once or twice, but if you're studying the whole semester, that test is going to be a lot easier.
I love it. It's all about the approach and the process.
Mm-hmm.
The rest takes care of itself.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, just think if we had high expectations for every podcast we did, we'd probably be very disappointed.
I know. Yeah. It is what it is, man. It's just sort of like adding nuggets here and there. And what are you doing? You said it, man. Most people have so much time they don't acknowledge, and it's because it's, but that's the thing is like, I don't think it always has to be, like if you do spend 2 hours on social media and not recognize it, it doesn't have to be that whole 2 hour block to start, just spend 10 more minutes doing some core work or some shit like that. 10 minutes a day. That's, an hour a week of core work. That'd probably put you in a hell of a lot better spot than you're in.
That's for sure. Yeah. And the thing is, we all got time for it.
Yeah, for sure.
We all got time for it. And we had time for you today. We'll have time for you again on Friday. Little Wednesday, Thursday. Double up before we head into the busy weekend. If you're doing Des Moines or Eagleman and any other awesome races, good luck to you. We'll catch you on Friday. As always, go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you need anything from Mike, he's available. Mike at c26triathlon.com. For anything from me specifically, Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
All right, man. Go enjoy the weather.
Check you later, dude.
See ya.